In September of 1918, General Pershing finally got his American offensive. As far back as June 1917, the St. Meehl salient had been earmarked by his staff as a possible objective for the American Expeditionary Force. The St. Meehl salient would serve as the only American-led offensive of the war. The build-up for the operation included 500,000 Americans, 110,000 French, 200,000 tons of supplies, and 50,000 tons of ammunition. Despite initially agreeing to the attack, Marshal Ferdinand Foch, the Supreme Allied Commander, changed his mind on the American venture on August 30th. Foch wanted to redirect all efforts into a larger campaign that would become the Meuse-Argonne offensive. To solidify the American presence in the war, General Pershing offered to attack in both arenas. The objective of the St. Meehl salient was to push back a German bulge in the lines. The area had been used to launch attacks into the Verdun region. Pershing's original plan had been to break through the bulge and to take Metz. The plan changed to incorporate Foch's larger upcoming offensive. The new American task would be to straighten out the bulge in the lines before transitioning troops to the Meuse. At 1 a.m. on September 12, 1918, the artillery opened up. 500,000 Americans attacked the salient, and they caught the German forces in the middle of a tactical withdrawal. The American First Army eliminated the salient in 4 days, and they captured 15,000 German prisoners. General Billy Mitchell assembled 1,481 aircraft for the operation, which was the largest collection of air power ever used in war at the time. The operation was a success. The Americans suffered approximately 7,000 casualties, but they had pushed the enemy out of a strategic stronghold the Germans had held for the majority of the war. The operation, however, was a little too easy. Behind the AEF's success, there had been numerous issues of command, control, and logistics, even though the Germans had not committed themselves to a full defense. Thus, the relative ease of victory, combined with the quick turnaround required for the Americans to take part in the new offensive, meant issues facing the AEF would not be immediately addressed. Following the overwhelming victory at the St. Meehl salient, General Pershing and the U.S. forces faced an even greater obstacle. Within 2 weeks of the operation at St. Meehl, Pershing had to reposition his forces 60 miles away to take part in the Meuse-Argonne offensive. Then Colonel George C. Marshall was responsible for shifting more than 30 divisions to the new start-off point. The region of the Meuse-Argonne provided some of the best defensive positions on the Western Front, and unlike the retreating German forces at St. Meehl, here the enemy intended to hold their ground. The defenses dated back to 1914, and the Germans had been improving their positions ever since. The Meuse-Argonne would be the American sector of a larger attack from the Allied forces. From the North Sea to the Meuse River, British, French, and American forces were making a massive push against the Germans. The AEF were in high spirits following their victory at St. Meehl, but the issues that had arisen during the fighting had not been addressed. Despite their tactical loss, the German opinion of the American skill had diminished. In response to their defeat, a German intelligence report stated that the Americans have not yet sufficient experience. Up until this time, our men have had too high an opinion of the Americans. The offensive would see 16 American infantry divisions take part in the fighting, and 10 artillery brigades from American and French forces would be their backup. Of the 9 divisions tasked with the initial assault, only 3, the 4th, 28th, and 77th, had experienced heavy fighting. Much of the fighting strength of the combat divisions had been used at St. Meehl and needed to rest and rebuild manpower to make up for battlefield losses. Much of the air power and tanks also required maintenance and were unavailable for the initial attack. The battle would start on September 26, 1918, and it would last until the end of the war. The battle at the Meuse would become the largest land offensive in United States military history. The attack began after an intense artillery barrage, where in 3 hours, more ammunition was fired than the combined total of the Union and Confederate armies during the American Civil War. The American divisions outnumbered their German counterparts by 8-1. The difficult terrain, strong defensive positions, and veteran tactics of the Germans, however, made the fighting difficult and long-lasting. After 4 days of heavy fighting, the AEF had not reached the objective set for the first day. The Americans' logistical problems additionally made food and ammunition a struggle to bring to the front lines. As had been the case of St. Meehl, command and control also was an issue for American forces. In October, members of Major Charles W. Whittlesey's battalion lost contact with friendly forces and they were surrounded by the enemy. 5 days later, only 194 of the 600 lost battalion men survived to be rescued. Part of the command and control problem had been General Pershing's insistence of direct command. With the massive line he was controlling, the limited communication with the front, his coordination with Allied commanders, and multiple divisions serving under British and French armies, it became too much to handle. On October 16th, he relinquished direct command of 1st Army over to General Hunter Liggett, and he also created 2nd Army under General Bullard. Despite the difficulties the Americans faced, the offensive helped the Allies push to a final victory. The sheer number of men the Americans had put into the attack, accompanied by their ferocity, had forced the Germans to put more troops in the Meuse than desired. Meanwhile, the larger offensive saw gains in the British and French areas of attack. By the end of the Meuse-Argonne offensive, the AEF had advanced 34 miles against enemy lines. On November 11, 1918, at 5:10 a.m., the Germans signed the armistice that would end the war. No American officer was present at the event, despite the AEF holding 21% of the Western Front. 1.2 million Americans fought in the Meuse-Argonne offensive, more men than had served in the Confederate Army during the Civil War. Harry S. Truman, George S. Patton Jr., and George C. Marshall all played roles in the Meuse-Argonne. The average casualty rate was 2,550 per day, and 6,000 Americans died every week of the offensive. Despite the odds, the AEF fought to victory. A letter from a German officer in November 1918 reads, "The Americans are here. We can kill them, but we can't stop them."